Well, now that summer is here, spending time on a boat, certainly a great way, if you can, to enjoy the season. So Tom Sinas joining us today to explain boating accident laws and what you may need to know as an owner, maybe even an operator as well, Tom.
It is that time of year, and it's something that we hope never happens, but every summer it does.
Right.
Right? Something terrible happens on a lake, on a river, on one of the Great Lakes. So I thought, as just a reminder, in hopes that it won't happen, what is the law in this area? Right? People ask me this a lot. These aren't cars. What's the law? Well, the general law when it comes to injuries that happen on a boat is that we apply what we call General Negligence Law, the General Law of Negligence. And that means you have to prove the basic concepts of negligence that would apply in any case. In other words, you have to prove that the person driving the boat was somehow failed to use reasonable care, and that failure led to someone being injured, and that person was in fact injuries and sustained what we call a form of damages. This is the basic outline of the negligence claim. And those concepts apply to people who are operating boats, and it also can apply to people who own boats. So if you own a boat, for example, the law in Michigan will presume if your children are driving the boat or someone who lives with you, your wife is driving the boat, the law presumes that you've given consent to that person to operate the boat, and you as the owner can therefore be liable if something terrible happens. So then people sometimes say, well, wait a minute, is my liability limited by other laws? You know, we talk a lot about no fault. Well, no fault doesn't have anything to do with boats, right? It only applies to motor vehicles, and boats are not motor vehicles. So the ability to get your medical expenses covered through another insurance company doesn't apply in a boating accident. Otherwise stated, the person operating or perhaps who owns the boat is liable for all those damages, whether they're medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and the list goes on. So how do these events get investigated? Well, it's complicated. It depends on the particular body of water, who has jurisdiction. You'll see everybody from local law enforcement, county law enforcement, and the Coast Guard involved, depending on where it occurs. But there are some rules that people need to remember about mandatory reporting of events that occur on a boat. And I would encourage people to look this up online, but at least remember this concept that if something serious happens, if someone dies or disappears from a vessel, you have to report that right away to the nearest law enforcement you can find. There's also a requirement that you make a written report to the Department of Natural Resources if something serious, if someone is injured on your boat. That report has to be made within 48 hours. And there are other sort of unique scenarios, but I think the takeaway here is that if something does happen on the boat, obviously you contact law enforcement to make sure that someone's being taken care of, but also make sure you're fulfilling your obligations to contact the DNR and anybody else.
Good to know. All right, Tom, where do people track it down?
They can find us online at www.sinusdramus.com. Give us a phone call in West Michigan at 616-301-3333, or shoot us an email at info@sinusdramus.com.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Derek.